Hello and welcome to another episode of MacStories Unwind. I'm John Voorhees, and I've got Federico Fatici with me. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing really well. If you are both a listener of NPC, Next Portable Console, and this show, you will notice Federico and I are wearing the same clothes. It's not that we wear the same clothes day after day after day. It's that sometimes we record.
We try not to. Yeah.
We try not to. We're not hermits, but we do sometimes record shows back to back. And that's what happened today. And we just got finished talking to Brendan Bigley all about the Nintendo Switch 2. We had a great episode in the main show all about the launch and the hardware and some of the technologies that are involved. And then in NPC Excel for our Patreon members, we talked a little bit more about the games and some of the technologies going on there and some of the details. And literally while we were recording, there was even more information that came out. So we thought we'd start off MacStories Unwind with a little bit of a recap of some of what's going on. Because I guess the place to start, Federico, is one of the things that you said during NPC was that I bet that Nintendo's using some of the AI APIs that NVIDIA has, because all Nintendo has said, at least during the Direct, which was the day before we're recording this, was that it was using a custom NVIDIA chip. We don't know exactly what chip or how it's designed or what kind of cores it has or anything like that until literally we got off with Brendan and there was an NVIDIA blog post that you and I just both quickly read before we got on here. So why don't you explain to folks what this is all about and why it's important, I guess?
Yeah. So as I theorized in MPC, which, in that episode, we go into a lot more technical detail about the console itself. But I mentioned that I said I'm willing to put money on the table and say that Nintendo is collaborating with NVIDIA to do techniques like AI-driven resolution upscaling and frame generation, and that sort of like RTX technologies that we've seen on PC. I bet they're doing the same thing on the Nintendo Switch 2. So we got this blog post from NVIDIA confirming that, we teamed up with Nintendo for the Nintendo Switch 2. They're actually on the record saying that the Switch 2 delivers 10x, so 10 times the graphical power of the original Nintendo Switch. Interesting number. But also, so this so far unnamed NVIDIA processor, they're saying that it has an NVIDIA GPU inside, obviously, with RT cores and Tensor cores. So these are two separate things. So the RT cores are the same cores that you may have seen in NVIDIA graphic cards and are specifically used for ray tracing. That's what RT stands for. And the RT cores are used, it seems, in the Nintendo Switch 2 for ray tracing and improving lights, reflections, shadows, that sort of like illumination graphics, like those sort of graphical frameworks that tend to be very intensive, both on the GPU. There's a dedicated, like one or more, they mentioned RT cores, so multiple RT cores are in this NVIDIA processor. We didn't hear Nintendo mention ray tracing on the Nintendo Switch 2, but this is what NVIDIA is saying.
No,
There's
but
also,
looking at those trailers, you could tell that they were doing a lot more with lighting than the original Switch ever could.
Yeah. There's also multiple Tensor cores. So Tensor cores are used for AI tasks. Tensor chips, Tensor cores are used by the likes of NVIDIA, by Google. Google, they have their own TPUs even, which are tensor processing units. These are essentially chips and cores of a chip that are specifically optimized for deep learning and artificial intelligence tasks. In this case, NVIDIA is saying that they're bringing DLSS. So deep learning supersampling. It's a PC technology that you've heard multiple times. It's usually used for resolution upscaling and frame generation.
Yeah.
The latest version of DLSS on PC, DLSS 4, can even generate, I believe, 4 frames for every single frame that is actually produced by the GPU. So you're basically intermixing the real frames with the fake frames from AI to smooth out gameplay and result in higher frame rates. Now, NVIDIA is saying in this blog post that they're bringing DLSS for boosting resolution. They don't mention frame generation.
They also don't mention the version of DLSS.
They don't mention the version of DLSS. So knowing Nintendo, I bet this is like a custom fork of DLSS.
2.0.
I would I would say it's either like a DLSS 2.5 or a skinned version of DLSS 3 without frame gen, but I am not convinced that there's no frame generation involved. I'm waiting, like I mentioned on MPC, I'm waiting for a Digital Foundry breakdown and analysis of the image. It's pretty easy to tell when you're dealing with, especially if you're an expert like the folks at Digital Foundry, when you're looking at a real frame or an AI generated frame. But even if there's no frame generation involved, which again, I mean, it's possible that Nintendo managed to squeeze as much performance out of this chip and say, well, we can run Metroid Prime at 1080p, 120 FPS. It's possible, but I wouldn't be shocked if actually this version of DLSS, it's a custom one built with Nintendo and the Switch 2 in mind, but there's some frame generation also involved as part of the process. Officially, NVIDIA is saying we're using that for boosting the resolution. Also on the show, on MPC, I mentioned, I bet they're using NVIDIA tech when it comes to the face recognition stuff for the Nintendo Switch 2 camera. And sure enough, the Tensor cores are also being used for face tracking and background removal. I theorized that Nintendo was also using the NVIDIA RTX audio, I think it's called, for the sort of isolating your voice and sort of doing noise cancellation to remove the other noises when you're talking into the microphone. NVIDIA doesn't mention the audio stuff, so maybe the audio stuff is built in-house by Nintendo.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah, it's really interesting to see, to me, like stepping back and thinking back to 2017, the original Switch was built on a foundation of an NVIDIA chip, the Tegra that
the Tegra X1 from
something like that.
Yeah.
It was in an NVIDIA Shield, and it was a couple of years old when the Switch came out. So, kind of it was like I would call it almost a bargain bin chip at that point when it was put in the Switch. And now they're doing something that's a lot more custom and a lot more cutting edge.
And even more fascinating is the fact that from the NVIDIA blog post, we now know that the internal display of the Nintendo Switch 2 with variable refresh rate is an NVIDIA G-Sync display.
Right.
So that's also a surprise that we didn't hear yesterday with the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct. So yeah, you're looking at quite the portable machine, which justifies. I mean, you're looking at a portable machine that can also be docked, that comes with a relatively modern NVIDIA GPU inside that has Tensor cores, RT cores, and a G-Sync display with variable refresh rate. It's a pretty premium machine, which, having followed Nintendo for 30 years at this point, maybe it's time we let go of the notion that Nintendo can only make toy-like cheap machines, because this is not a toy.
This is not that.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it really is interesting how this affects the landscape of video games for 2025, because, already everybody's waiting for Grand Theft Auto, right? And now they're waiting for the Switch 2. And I think that those two things by themselves are going to suck most of the oxygen out of the room. I think we're still going to see some big games come out that are not Nintendo exclusive games. There's a lot of games coming to the Switch 2, a lot of first-party games, and a lot of third-party games. And I think that is going to... But I think the console itself, and by extension, the games that come to it, especially early in the summer, plus GTA, are really going to suck up most of the oxygen in the video game industry this year.
Yeah, I think that those will be the two narratives sort of this year. The only wild card, and I'm sure this is something that we will dig deeper into MPC over the next few months, is what's going to happen with Valve. Is Valve going to feel the pressure to tease a Steam Deck 2 at some point? And what's going to happen with other portable announcements by Sony and Microsoft? Maybe they also feel the pressure, especially going into the holiday season, to know, hey, we're also working on a portable.
Right.
We know that Microsoft is working with Asus for whatever Xbox branded handheld they've been working on, but we'll see. I'm just saying, I think we are now more than ever extremely well positioned with MPC when it comes to covering all these handhelds.
There is a lot to talk about. And the other dynamic that's out there are these tariffs that the United States has imposed because we've already seen the likes of Anbernic, which had put out handhelds every month for the entire year of 2024 has not released a single handheld yet. So it's a very different landscape today than it was even just 3 months ago for a whole bunch of different reasons. So if you're interested in any of that, be sure to check out NPC.
I have a question for you, John.
Yeah.
When you saw the Donkey Kong announcement
Yeah.
with the game called Bananza, be honest, did your mind go back to the old Bonanza days on Relay?
Of course it did. Of course it did. How can I not think of Matt and Mike when the word Bonanza comes up, even if it's spelled with an A instead of an O? Yeah, I did think of that. And that game looks fantastic. It looks like a very different Donkey Kong game than anything we've seen before. I mean, we just got, we got the remake of Tropical Freeze on the Switch One not that long ago, which is just good game. Also very kind of traditional Donkey Kong game. Very hard to, historically, a lot of those games are very difficult games. I think that this looks like a more, I don't know, more of a crowd pleaser type of Donkey Kong, because it looks like you can just like go bananas and smash everything, upright, left, center, and do everything. And it looks like it'll be a cool game.
Yeah, it's not clear if it'll be like open world, like
it's not clear at all. Yeah,
Mike had a joke yesterday when he saw the trailer. He said "Donk of the Wild," which it may look like that. It seems to me like, I don't know. I got some Astrobot vibes also from it, like these spaces where you can sort of bump into anything, destroy anything. I think if anything, that physics engine that they showed off in Donkey Kong Bananza, I will never get tired of saying this name. That's also like another, better physics are mentioned as one of the advantages of the NVIDIA GPU.
Yes.
So that's also like, I think for this generation, we're gonna continue seeing Nintendo sort of pushing the limits of a more powerful Nintendo Switch 2, not for graphical fidelity, not for photorealism, although there's also an option. I mean, you're looking at Cyberpunk, right? Landing on the Switch 2. But Nintendo itself, I think they will use the more horsepower not to do a photorealistic Mario, but to say, well, now you can destroy anything. Now you have a better physics engine. Now you can have an open world. Like, that's the kind of stuff that Nintendo can do with more graphical power.
Yeah, they'll just get more inventive with the gameplay, which is what they've always done. And I think that's really exciting, because you look at that Donkey Kong game and it's like no other Donkey Kong game you've ever seen. So I think that physics engine is going to allow developers, whether they're at Nintendo or third parties, to do a lot of new, interesting things with the Switch 2 that we're not used to. So I'm really excited about it. I mean, it's coming June 5th, right before WWDC. So I'm hoping to get my hot little hands on one for the flight out to Cupertino. So we'll see how that works out. I mean, I know Federico, as everybody knows, has this video game guy. He's sitting over there feeling pretty smug, I think, and comfortable in the likelihood he's going to get one. I will be doing what I can to pre-order, and then our co-host Brendan is going to be traveling to Japan at the time. So he's got the most difficult task of all.
Yeah. All right, John, are you bringing anything to the show today?
I do. I'm going to bring a couple of different things. It's kind of a weird mixture. I realize that I've never really talked about here the Indiana Jones and the Great Circle game, which is
nice. I played a couple of hours of that game.
Oh, did you? All right. What did you think, Federico?
I really liked it. I did the first level and then the Rome Vatican mission.
Yeah,
I had a great time, and now that I have an Xbox again, I want to dig in again.
Yeah, you should. I want to play more of it. I picked it up again a few days ago, and that's what made me think about it and bring it to the show. And I really enjoyed the Vatican area because I felt like I was at the Vatican. I mean, you could stand up on a rooftop, look down at St. Peter's Square, and it was like, yeah, I remember this from when I was at the Vatican. This is what it looks like. This is like, these are where the buildings are, all this stuff. It was really cool. And then there's a whole bunch of other locations that you can go to, but it's very much in the tradition of the early Indiana Jones games. There's a combination of action and stealth along with solving puzzles. And, there are a few things about it that bother me a little bit. I feel like I have to pull the map out way too much, that kind of got in the way of the gameplay at times. But after a while, you get the hang of it and don't need the map quite as much once you kind of know your way around. But it's just fun doing stuff that's very Indiana Jones, beating up the Nazis in a back alley at the outside the Vatican, or using your whip to climb up a scaffolding to get to a rooftop so that you can jump into a window and try to find some artifact. It's a really, really cool game, and it came out at the end of last year, right before the holiday season, and I played a good bit of it then. I've also played it using GeForce Now in the Apple Vision Pro. And
Nice.
if you have a really good connection, that could be kind of a fun way to play it because it's so big. I've played GeForce Now on the Anode Portal, and I've played a little bit of it on the Xbox too. I mean, your saves, update everywhere, so that's kind of a nice aspect of it. So I've played it a bunch of different ways and found it to be one of my favorite games of 2024. But it was so late in the year that I didn't really talk about it much. And so I've been revisiting it as I wait for the Nintendo Switch 2 to come out.
Nice.
Uh, Federico, the other thing I want to mention is this thing that you clued me into, which is the OnePlus 5,000 milliamp hour MagSafe battery. You can see
I have one too. I also have one. Sylvia is using it today, but yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So this is kind of the behind the scenes part of this, is that you and I share a list of things that you are going to be linking in MacStories Weekly, our newsletter for Club MacStories. And one of the links a couple of weeks ago was, in fact, this battery pack. And I saw it and I was like, oh, first of all, I knew immediately that you had already ordered one.
Yeah.
And secondly, I looked at the specs of it, and I'm like, yeah, I'm getting one of these too, because the thing about it is that if you look, it's very, very thin. This is a 5,000 milliamp hour battery. This is like roughly 3 times the capacity of the one that Apple did, like what it was like 3 or 4 years ago. That white battery pack, that was like 1,400 milliamp hours. This is 5,000, but it's thinner than that, and roughly the same surface area size. And you put it on your iPhone. I should do it right now. It's almost exactly the same size as the Apple Wallet. So there, I'm going to show this off on video for people who are watching. And it charges, I think it's 7.5 watts. If I remember right, it's G2, I believe. So it's a big step up from the old Apple battery pack, which I actually got out and tried to use the other day. And with the big phone, it can't even keep up with the discharge of the phone at times, because it's just not powerful enough. But this is a great little charger if you're traveling.
Yeah, great little accessory. Sylvia saw it and she was like, "I'm putting this in my bag. I'm taking this to work." And I was like, "Okay, sure." Yeah, it's great. It's great. I really like it.
Yeah, it's really nice, and it charges by USB-C too. So there's that as well. Well, that's it for another episode of MacStories Unwind. Get excited about the Switch. Go watch the Direct if you haven't. Go listen to NPC. We've got lots of thoughts and feels about what's coming. So, and I'm sure we'll be talking about it some more in the coming weeks. You can find the two of us also on MacStories.net. We are on social media, where Federico is at Vitici and I'm at John Voorhees. JohnVoorhees. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.